Okay, so it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Shelley Luce, who is the president and CEO of Hilda Bay, to our 411 seminar series. Hilda Bay is a local environmental nonprofit established in 1985. It is dedicated to making the coastal waters and watersheds in Greater Los Angeles safe, healthy, and clean through science, education, community action, and advocacy. Dr. Luce is responsible for determining Hilda Bay's policy priorities, forming smart strategic alliances, and growing public participation across Greater Los Angeles. Dr. Luce holds a Doctorate of Environmental Science and Engineering from here at UCLA, as well as a BS in Biology from McGill University. So we are very excited to welcome her back to campus, even if it is remotely. She began her advocacy career at Hilda Bay, serving as a staff scientist from 2001 to 2005. She went on to hold executive director positions at the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission, the Bay Foundation, and the Environment Now Foundation before rejoining Hilda Bay as president and CEO in 2017. I'll now turn it over to Dr. Luce, who will be speaking today on making a difference, science and advocacy in the nonprofit sector. Take it away.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to have the chance to talk with you all. And I'm gonna give a presentation for, I hope, about 25 minutes or so, so that we do have time for lots of questions and interaction. And maybe I'll have a few questions for some of you if you don't mind. I want to talk a little bit about the nonprofit world overall, kind of what is nonprofit and what do we do and why, and then how having a science background and working in the nonprofit sector, how I view making a difference, how I think we can make a difference if we come to the nonprofit sector with our science background. So I wanted to start with an introduction to Hilda Bay. So thank you, already read our mission statement. The picture on the right is a whole bunch of people celebrating after Nick Gabaldon Day, which is a day that we celebrate with the Black Surfers Collective and the Surf Bus Foundation in honor of the first recorded or known surfer of color who broke color barriers in Santa Monica Bay when he would paddle out at Santa Monica Beach, where people of color were allowed on the sand. And then he would paddle up to Malibu, 12 miles, to surf a better break because he couldn't park and walk across the sand at Malibu. So this is an issue of beach access. And I like to start the presentation with this because it is so important and so relevant today with so much that's going on. And as a nonprofit who works on beach and water quality issues, we cannot ignore issues of equity, including access, equity of access. So that's one of the projects we work on, and it's a wonderful day. It's actually coming up this Saturday. So if you go to Santa Monica Beach this Saturday, you'll see far more than these people, but all kinds of people. And importantly, the Surf Bus Foundation brings kids from all over LA and gives free surf lessons. So it's really fun. Okay, first I need to say that I did not want these little fish as my bullets, but I couldn't get rid of them. So I just gonna put that out there right now. What is nonprofit and how is it different? I'm starting with this because I didn't know. I kind of knew what nonprofit was, but I didn't know much about it or that I could have a career there until a graduate, a UCLA alumnus named Mark Gold called me and talked to me about Hilda Bay and a job opening they had. And I learned from there kind of on the job. So I like to start to let people know that this is a big and vibrant sector in California. It's truly amazing. It attracts incredible people and it's worth your consideration if you want to make a difference in the world. So how is nonprofit different and what do we do? We have to have a mission. We legally cannot make a profit. We can make revenue, but we cannot make a profit. And what that really means is you can't distribute money to shareholders. So we're not publicly owned and not traded on the NASDAQ or whatever, and we can't distribute profits to anybody, but we can make revenue and we can make more revenue than we spend. We just have to put in the bank and, use it for a rainy day or start a new program or whatever it is we want to do. Maybe buy people some new office chairs if it's been a decade or so, things like that. Having money in the bank is a bit of a luxury, but point being, we just can't make a profit and distribute to shareholders. Otherwise, you come up with ways of generating revenue, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. You have to have a board of directors, and they have to be fiscally responsible, meaning they have to review your finances. And usually the board of directors has the power to hire and fire the CEO. So I answer directly to my board of directors, there are 20 of them. And being on the board of directors is wide open. It's up to the nonprofit how they structure themselves. Do they want their requirements to be on the board of directors to be about, if you can give us $10,000 a year, you can be on our board. Or if you are a scientist, you can be on our board. Or, different kinds of requirements or criteria different organizations might put in place. But you answer to this group of people. It's a private entity. When I'm filling out tax forms and things like that, I usually have to check private business, but we need the public. So while we are technically private, meaning you can't, the public doesn't have a right to just come in my office anytime and look in my files like you do sort of have for a government agency, a public agency, but we need the public. So we operate in some ways like a public entity where we are doing a lot of outreach and constant trying to be very transparent with our constituents, our public. Sources of revenue for a nonprofit, I want to talk about a little bit. They are generally donations, grants, and contracts. In the social services sector, so if you work for a nonprofit that supports homeless people, for example, or provides mental health support in schools or things like that, food, meals for people who need food, then you may get a government contract that pays you per person served or per service rendered. Hilda Bay doesn't have anything like that, but we have a lot of individual donors, and we have significant funding from foundations. And these are big entities that you've heard of, some of them, the Packard Foundation, the Hewlett Foundation, all the wealthy names that you see in the news often have their own foundations, different names, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And there's a whole world of how they operate. They're very important for Hilda Bay, and we are a great recipient for them because we've been around a long time and we have a really clear way of reporting to them. So we're good at clearly asking for money, clearly saying what we're going to spend it on, and then very clearly reporting to them the outcomes of the funding that they gave us. So we rely on foundations quite a bit. Corporations also provide grants. They usually want something in exchange, for example, their logo on our website or something like that. And then there are special auditing requirements and IRS requirements for nonprofits. If you're a scientist and you're going into nonprofit, you just need to know that these requirements exist and make sure your nonprofit is following the rules. I hire a CFO who does that. And of course, our board needs to see that as well. And then lobbying is another special requirement for nonprofits. And I can talk a little bit more about that later, but just wanted to mention it as to point out kind of the ways that nonprofits, the kinds of restrictions nonprofits have on them because we are a nonprofit. So nonprofit also means that you are not paying we are not paying taxes. So when we get a grant for $100,000, we keep it. We use it to pay our staff and whatever else we need to do. We don't pay taxes to the IRS. And as a result, we get a lot of scrutiny from the IRS. And that's fine. You just have to know what you're doing. And you also are not allowed to lobby and use nonprofit funds. Money that you gain as a nonprofit, you can't spend that on a lobbyist. You couldn't pay me to go and lobby, which means working directly with legislators to write legislation. So that's a quick overview. Now I want to talk a little bit about one funding source, and that's relying on donors. I'm again going to do this quickly, then I'm going to get to the more sciencey stuff. But I want to put this out there because I think if you're thinking about going into nonprofit, you should know a little bit about this very important aspect of it, I guess, because if we don't have funding coming in, then we can't do the things that we need to do. So we need to attract donors. We rely on donors, and I'm talking about everyone who gives $25 and then right on up to, we have some donors who gives $100,000 a year, absolutely incredible, and even the foundations as well. We need to attract those donors. We need to have really good communications. We need to have a great website. We're very strong on social media. We need to make sure that we're out there when something happens, like an oil spill, for example. We'll talk more about that later. But we need to always be putting forward really clear messaging about who we are and what we do, so that people who resonate with people with whom that resonates want to support us. We have to track our donations, and that's actually really difficult because there's just so many aspects to it, and two people in the same house donating money, and people get offended if you ask them both for money. They only want you to ask the one person, not the other. It can get really tricky. So we use Salesforce, which is a huge database. It's great. We love it. It's not cheap, but we have 100,000 entries to manage, and many of them are interconnected, and we organize them into campaigns and do email them and don't email them. So it's very valuable. Means we have to support through our fundraising someone who actually operates our Salesforce database. Thanking donors is super important. I have learned everybody wants to be thanked for what they do. There's no doubt. And so we actually spend time coming up with ways to thank our donors. Not offending donors. I include this very deliberately because, as you know, you can't please all the people all the time. And I've certainly offended donors, or the actions of Hilda Bay have offended some donors. We maybe lose donors when we support something that they don't like, or vice versa. The way that I manage this is I stick to our mission, and I really think through and talk through very carefully certain campaigns. So sea level rise, for example, is a good one, because a lot of wealthy people have beachfront homes. I shouldn't say a lot of wealthy people. A lot of beachfront homes are owned by wealthy people who are also donors to groups like Hilda Bay, because of course they love the beach and they want to protect the beach. They don't want to hear that they shouldn't be on the beach, that they shouldn't have a seawall, that they shouldn't have, whatever protection they're wanting to put in place. And so I've definitely offended people when I've spoken at the Coastal Commission or done other things where we have said we shouldn't have seawalls anymore because it actually causes more erosion and that kind of thing. That's just one example. You have to kind of weigh it and say, well, we're going to lose some donors, but we don't have any other choice, and this is too important an issue for us. There may be other issues where we might say, you know what, it's a little bit out of our scope. I personally feel strongly about it, but Hilda Bay doesn't need to weigh in, or certainly doesn't need to, write it in the sky and make a big deal out of it. So we're going to leave that one alone. Asking for money is its own art, and we hire people to do that. They're not scientists in general. They are called development professionals, and they're really important. So when you work in nonprofit, you'll meet people whose job is asking for money, and the people that I've worked with who are best at it are very passionate about it and truly believe in what they're doing, and are not embarrassed to ask for money because they believe they're providing a service. Hilda Bay is providing a service. Clean beaches, it's clean water, it's access for all, it's an aquarium for school kids, it's all kinds of things. And so we're proud to ask for money, not shy. But different people feel differently about it. So it's wonderful to have development staff who enjoy it. I wanted to talk a little bit about foundations and philanthropy in general and the ethical underpinnings, because one of the reasons that California has such an incredibly vibrant nonprofit sector is because we have rich people in California, or even just, I don't know what you would call them, average wealthy people. And we have a system in the United States that allows people to get a tax benefit if they give to a nonprofit, any nonprofit that has the official IRS status of 501c3. That's the paragraph in the IRS rules. So we're a 501c3, lots of causes that I agree with and love are 501c3s, but guess what? A whole bunch of causes that I don't agree with and don't love are also 501c3s, and people can give their money there if they want and get the same tax benefit. So there is a question of how we pay for things in our society. One thing I look at, one way that I see nonprofits is that we do what government refuses to do or shouldn't do or can't do. For Hilda Bay, we highlight pollution and unfairness when it comes to clean water. And we try to correct that, and we try to prevent pollution, and we try to save the planet basically through clean water. the government isn't doing certain things that I wish they would do, but either they don't have the laws and the ability, or just, our society has decided that's not government's job. So Hilda Bay is going to do it. In order to do that, we have to get enough people who want to support us. So what this system of philanthropy does is it allows individuals to decide what should happen. If individuals think that we should have no more oil drilling, then they're going to put their money to no more oil drilling. If they think we should have more oil drilling, then they're going to support organizations that want more oil drilling. Neither of these things are government decisions that the majority of the people voted for and we're moving ahead with them. So there's a bit of private influence. You hear about it with the Gates Foundation too. Why does Bill Gates have so much control over which diseases are being studied and have the most money going to prevent them? Because he has the most money and he's doing what he wants with it rather than giving it to a government or the World Health Organization to figure out. So you can decide whether you agree with this system or not. It's definitely a deeply entrenched system in the United States. And it does create, as I said, this incredible nonprofit sector that does amazing, amazing work, and that I'm very proud to work in, even with the ethical, even with the sometimes unclear, well, it's not unclear. I guess what I want to say is it's just something to think about, I guess, the ethical underpinnings. And it may not always be the same. Every administration considers changing the 501c3 tax benefit, for example. So it could change at some time. So I'm going to leave it there, but I welcome questions or comments about that later when I'm done this presentation. So now I'm going to jump to what Hilda Bay does and how science helps us to make progress on environmental issues. One of the things we do is we protect public health, people, and for me, the environment, aquatic life, by understanding water quality and helping others to understand it as well. And it applies to the beaches, you can see here in this photo, but also to freshwater. You see a swimming hole with a lot of people in it. That's in the San Gabriel Mountains, just outside the city of LA. And then the top left is the LA River. So Hilda Bay many years ago created a report card. It looks like this. If you click on one of these circles that has a number in it, it zooms in. 3 there means we've got 3 water quality monitoring sites there. So it zooms in, and then you can see if it has a B, it gets a smiley face. If it has an F, it gets I guess a dead face because it has X's on the eyes. I don't know. A clear sign that you should not get in the water there. This is zoomed in. We actually do this with data that we collect for the entire west coast of the United States, and plus now 3 beaches in Tijuana, which is very exciting. And we collect the data from government agencies who are required to do the testing. So that table there, the white table, is the raw data that we collect. Most people don't know what total coliform, fecal coliform, or enterococcus are. They don't know what most probable number means, and they don't know how to compare the measurement to the health standard and determine for themselves if it's safe to swim at the beach. If there's too much bacteria, these bacteria indicate that viruses are present that will make people sick. If there's too much, then it's not safe to get in the water. So we interpret that into the grades, A+ all the way through F. And that is a big service. I've been doing that for 30 years, and many people use it. And this was the first one. It was a hard copy at the time, 1991. This is a scientific paper on which the grades are based. 2 of the names on this paper, 2 of the authors, were Hilda Bay employees, Hilda Bay staff at the time that the paper was published, which I think is pretty cool. And the beach report card was used to help pass AB 411 in 1997, which is the law that requires the government to collect all those data and post them and make them available so that we can gather them and turn them into grades that people understand. So this is a big success story about how science was used to educate the public, protect public health, and then advance policy so that the government provides the basis that we need for the report card. Now we want to do the same thing for the river report card. We collect data ourselves and with other nonprofits. we go out and collect the water samples and do the bacteria testing for some of the sites in LA County rivers where people swim. And we're advancing a bill, you can see they're called AB 1066, which would require counties to do that data collection as they do for beaches. And we view this in a couple of different ways. One way is an equity issue, because not everybody lives near a beach. People still want to swim. They still want to take advantage of our aquatic resources. They still want to cool off, and it's getting hotter, as you know. So we want people to be able to do so safely. And AB 66 is being carried by Richard Bloom and would make those requirements. Now, here's the bit about lobbying. You can work directly on a piece of legislation, but you have to report it. You have to report who did it and how many hours they spent. And if you spend over a certain number of hours, you have to pay the government. And I think it's a percentage you have to pay. It's almost like paying a tax on the hours of the person who worked. And that's fine. We do sometimes lobby in order to get something like this done. Other things like the AB 411, or I'm going to talk here about Measure W, which was passed in LA County, excuse me, some time ago, let's see, 2018. We don't lobby, but we go to every public hearing and make public comments and public testimony, and that's different. That's not me writing things down and handing it to a legislator and they write it into the bill. It's people like this, people like me going and testifying or going to a march, carrying raindrop-shaped signs to convince our legislators, or in this case, we convince the voters to vote yes on Measure W. Measure W is a tax. It's based on property taxes. So if you own property in Los Angeles County, anywhere in Los Angeles County, you pay an extra tax as of 2019 based on the imperviousness of your property. And that is generally determined by land use, although they're now using aerial photography or whatever you call it, satellite imagery, to be more exact. So single family homes pay a certain percentage as if it was impervious. If you have fixed your property, I would say, to make it pervious or to collect and capture your stormwater on site, then you can actually get out of paying the tax. You have to apply to the county for that. So the reason I put this in here is because it is an example of nonprofits working for a very long time on a very difficult pollution issue, being told for decades that it couldn't be cleaned up because there's no money to do it, and then helping to pass a tax measure. It's hard to get new taxes in place in the state of California. You have to get a 2/3 vote of the public, and everybody said it was impossible, but thank you for the thumbs up, Christina. We did it. Hilda Bay and a whole bunch of other nonprofits and a whole bunch of cities and other agencies supported as well, namely the City of Los Angeles, the County of Los Angeles. So it generates about $300 million per year that the county and all the cities in the county can spend on projects to capture and clean stormwater. The role of nonprofits in this was extremely important, not only to convince people to vote for it, because some people are more likely to vote for something if they hear from a nonprofit, because they know we don't make a profit. So I'm not going to make money off of this. They also know we're not government, and some people just don't trust government with their money. But if Hilda Bay says we should do this, then maybe we should do it. So it's really important that nonprofits do that. And then our involvement was also very important here because we demanded and got others to demand, like these women in the photo, that the county write this measure so that projects that provide multiple benefits, meaning green space and native plant habitat and things like that, are prioritized over projects that don't. So gray infrastructure, pipes and CDS units and things like that. Also, the nonprofits insisted that more money go to disadvantaged communities than disadvantaged communities pay in taxes. And this is a very, very important thing for achieving equity in our county, because for a very long time, government projects paid for by government money have tended to occur in wealthier neighborhoods. We wanted to make sure that the priority for these greening and cleaning up of water, these projects that will green and clean up the water, are prioritized in low-income neighborhoods, and neighborhoods that need it the most. They have the least green. It's hottest there. They don't have enough trees. We need more parks. We need cleaner water on site, not asking people to get themselves to the beach or asking themselves get themselves to a river that you're allowed to swim in, not the LA River, but upstream in the San Gabriel. Right here in our neighborhoods, we should have cleaner water. So that was something that I am 100% certain would not have been included in this measure W, if the nonprofits had not been a big and powerful part. One reason we were powerful is because we all joined together, which is a whole other story that I could talk about for an hour. But sometimes it's hard to get nonprofits to play nicely together because everybody has their own priorities. In this case, everybody put everything else aside and said the number one thing is equity for disadvantaged communities. The number two thing is projects have to be green and multi-benefit. And so that was very powerful. Now I want to tell you about some of the less glamorous parts. This is some of the stuff that continues to go on as a result of Measure W. It's called now the Safe Clean Water Program. And I just put up a few things here. For example, we still go to tons of meetings and testify. That's something we have to spend a lot of time doing. Now, this was pre-COVID. Hopefully we'll get back to in-person meetings because honestly, testimony in person seems to be more effective. There are things like this where we have to check on the projects that are being proposed and comment on them. There are stormwater investment plans that have to be approved. I sit on the regional oversight committee for this Safe Clean Water Program now. So you read all the stormwater investment plans, which is describing how the money is going to be spent in each of the sub-watersheds of LA County. Here is one of the sub-watersheds, Central Santa Monica Bay, basically the watershed of Ballona Creek, if you're familiar with that. It's huge, it's 132 square miles and needs a lot of work. It includes a lot of disadvantaged areas that really need to be prioritized for green projects, and Hilda Bay stays on top of that. So we go to the meetings of all the watershed area committees to talk about how the money is going to be spent. So as a nonprofit, the work is never done, clearly. I'm not going to say who said this. I'm just going to tell you it wasn't me because I can't remember who said it. It's the guy who wrote the book about messing with the machinery in the desert. Somebody on this call will know it. Anyway, the quote was, I think it's something like all our victories are temporary, but all our losses are permanent. And that's environmental work. We save big ears, or what is it, bare ears? I forget. You save an area from development, great, that's temporary. And if you let your guard down, someone else is going to come along and try to develop it. But our losses are permanent. Once it's developed, it's gone, at least permanent in human time scale. So we won, we got Measure W, and now we follow up and we make sure that it gets implemented properly. And that takes a lot of staying power. I wanted to give you a little science at least. So here's a graph. This is from a stormwater report that we did in 2019. And the reason we did it is because we wanted to show the Regional Water Board, which is a board of people appointed by the governor to make decisions on permits. So they implement the Clean Water Act, basically. Clean Water Act is federal, but in California, they've delegated authority to the state water boards. Each region of California has its own regional board. And here they were making a decision about a new stormwater permit. How much pollution are we going to allow to be discharged into our waterways? So we were very upset about the last permit. We felt it had no teeth. And in order to show that, we made this graph to show how well implementation has gone since the last permit, which I believe was in 2012. And so Annalisa Moe, who works for Hilda Bay, analyzed all the projects and all the water quality data for all these different water bodies. And the orange is the percentage of the final goal completed as of 2018. So the permit was passed in 2012, and in 2018, most of these waterways had made barely any progress. The red bars, the little vertical bars, are the interim goals. So they were supposed to, in Malibu Creek, they should have been at that little red bar by 2017. They weren't even close. They were capturing 0.4 acre feet of stormwater, and their overall goal is, of course, much higher than you can see how far the gray bar is. The gray bar is where they need to get to. So what we're trying to show is that without teeth, without enforcement, without numeric requirements, the cities and county of Los Angeles were not going to make progress on cleaning up stormwater. And I think we showed that very effectively. In the meantime, we helped to pass Measure W, which provides money to do the projects here, and just recently argued for months, maybe a year and a half, with the regional board and LA County about the new permit. We created this to show them your old permit did not work. You need to be tougher. Unfortunately, they didn't get tougher. They put in some more, I guess I would say, they included some things that will make it easier to enforce or bring enforcement actions, meaning fines against cities and counties if they don't make better progress. There's no guarantee that that will happen. So the work of Hilda Bay and others now is to continue to track whether the company or whether the cities and the county are using Measure W and any other funding they can to build the kinds of projects that help them move this orange bar further to the right. I just threw that out there as if you all know exactly what a permit is and exactly what the final goal would be and all that kind of thing. So I feel like, again, I could talk for longer about this, but hopefully that was understandable. And really what I'm trying to show you is that this is the kind of thing that the average person doesn't do. It's not their job. They have other jobs. They cannot do this. But if you're a scientist and you work in nonprofit and someone like my development team is getting grants to fund you to do this, you can do this and you can build the argument and you can even provide the basis for a lawsuit. For example, Hilda Bay doesn't tend to sue people, but our partners at the LA Waterkeeper and NRDC do. And they use things like this coming from our scientists as well as others to build their case. So I think it's really important work. The last thing I'm going to mention is this one, because it was a very public and kind of fun campaign called Skip the Stuff. We're working a lot on reducing single-use plastics, and we had incredible, beautiful social media on this. I can see a little bit of it here. There was a ton more that I'm not going to go through. And again, in the background was this very, very boring typed memos, super important. On the left was a report from the Bureau of Sanitation to the City Council on what it would take to implement this. So we read it, then we go to the City Council and we comment on it and we provide answers to some of the things, or we refute them if we don't agree, or we support them if we do. Similarly, it says here communication from the public. You can see someone sent in something. This was then included in a report to the City Council. So we are the ones encouraging people. That's why it says I strongly support the hashtag Skip the Stuff ordinance, because that's the campaign by which we got people to send things like that in so that the City Council could see that there's a lot of public support for this. And then finally on the right, therefore, the people of the City of Los Angeles do ordain as follows. Article 3, disposable foodware, accessories, and plastic, etc. That is the actual ordinance that is going to, yes, that is going to require that restaurants do not automatically put in all the plastic forks and spoons and disposable chopsticks and straws and stuff like that. You have to ask for it. You can still get it. If you need it, you can have it, but you're not going to open up, get home where you have all your metal silverware there ready to use and find out that you've got all this garbage as well. I think it's important. Now, don't get me wrong. I want to phase out plastic altogether. This is a baby step, but really the reason I'm showing it here is because I wanted to show you a little bit of the background that we as scientists and policy experts do to help make something like Skip the Stuff happen. So that's the slideshow that I prepared. One of the things that got in the way of me refining this over the last few days was a very big and tragic oil spill that Hilda Bay has been extremely busy responding to as scientists, as public health experts, and as advocates. So I can also talk a bit about that if you all have questions about it, but I would love to just open it up now for all of you. So thank you.
Great, thank you so much. A round of applause.